So in yesterday's video, I talked about the idea of Tesla stock pushing upwards as we got closer to the end of November. And what did we get for today? Well, we saw Tesla stock pushing upwards. Now I want to go ahead and talk about what are some other things that we should absolutely be aware about in regards to Tesla. What are some things that we should be watching? But before we go ahead and move forward and talk about Tesla, I also want to highlight some additional trade ideas. See, Tesla was something I mentioned publicly here on YouTube, but I also did share some trade ideas privately within the Push and Profit private group. For example, recently I shared a swing trade idea about going long for GLD, and I talked about how there's this ETF that tracks the gold bullion and how this was something that we wanted to watch. And lo and behold, this idea that I mentioned just recently is already doing well. As we saw that gold has pretty much pushed aggressively into pre-markets and after hours so far. So if you guys are interested in receiving trade ideas like the one recently shared with gold, then make sure to check out the first link in the description below, because there is a link for the Push and Profit private group. And guess what? We are having a Black Friday sale, and this is pretty much one of the biggest sales for the year. So if you're interested in receiving my daily briefings where every single day the markets are open, I talk about what's currently going on in the overall economy and the markets, and I also share trade ideas. But it's not only just swing trade ideas, I also have intraday ideas for those individuals who do like to trade on those intraday plays. For example, today I shared a trade idea for ticker symbol META, Meta, and I talked about looking to go long once Meta fell down to about $335.80. And if we take a look at Meta, it pretty much fell down to a low of $335.90, which is pretty much 10 cents below my entry, my target entry to start going long on Meta. And so if you would have just adjusted the entry by just 10 cents, it would have been a great play for today as well. So again, if you're interested in the daily briefings and those trade ideas, both swing trades and intradays, it's going to be the first link in the description below. And again, we are having a massive Black Friday sale event. But again, moving forward, I want to talk about what are some things that we want to be aware about in regards to Tesla. Now, although I did highlight that I'm bullish on Tesla as we move closer to the end of November, I do want to highlight that $260 area, as that's an area where there's a lot of volume relative to price. And as I've shared a ton of times on this channel, when there's a lot of volume relative to price, that means that there's a lot of exchanging between the buyers and the sellers, and so that could create some sort of resistance or an area where Tesla may touch and start consolidating. And so that's an area that we absolutely want to pay attention to. But moreover, we also want to pay attention to the overall S&P 500 index ETF, ticker symbol SPY, as it has recently touched an area that has been a descending trend line. This is an area where every single time it's touched it in the past, SPY has broken below. However, we want to see if SPY actually breaks above this area, because if it does, well, guess what? Then the overall market starts pushing up. And as I've highlighted in yesterday's video, Tesla is a high beta stock. And so when the overall market is pushing upwards, well, guess what? We start to see Tesla follow in its footprints with a more amplified movement. And so that's something that we want to pay attention to. Does the overall S&P 500 now get rejected, or are we going to actually break above that descending trend line, especially now that we're having a shorter weekend for the markets? And as I've said multiple times in the channel below, when we have these holiday weekends, we tend to see short sellers cover their positions, as it's more riskier to go ahead and short a stock when it's a shorter week. Again, one of the reasons is because if there's any news, well, now you can't close your position. And one thing you have to understand when it comes to short selling, you take on much more risk, because the risk is unlimited versus when you're going long on the stock. And so when we have these shorter weekends, we tend to see the markets rally a bit. And so we want to pay attention again to that area with the overall S&P 500. Now, if we take a look to the 10-year Treasury yield, we saw that it did come down further. And this was honestly a very interesting day, because one of the things I've told the Push and Profit private group so many times before is that we want to pay attention to the 10-year Treasury yield, because typically you have this risk premium situation where when the 10-year Treasury yield is upwards, well, that's bad for stocks. It takes away the risk appetite. However, when there's this inverse, when the 10-year Treasury yield is going downwards, we see stocks push upwards. And indeed, we did see that with Tesla. But when you look at the overall S&P 500 or the NASDAQ, we saw it fall downwards. Now, one of the reasons was because today we had the economic data of the Federal Reserve meeting minutes released, and it kind of poured some cold water on the markets as we heard more of this rhetoric from the Federal Reserve saying that, hey, they may need to hike going forward in the future, being that inflation is still a challenge. However, one of the things I've shared on this channel before is that although I believe that the Fed is done hiking, I said that they are most likely going to continue with this narrative that, hey, if we need a hike, we will. And so that's something that's putting a little bit of a sour taste in the markets, because the markets had believed that the Feds are no longer going to stick with this narrative and continue with this rhetoric. But we did indeed hear from them that in the meeting minutes that were released today that, hey, if they have to, they will hike. But again, I believe that it's most likely that they won't, especially because multiple times on this channel I said that we haven't truly felt the true ramifications from the previous rate hikes. In fact, I want us to take a look at this chart right over here. Now, right here, we're taking a look at the previous rate hikes from 2022 to 2023. And one of the things we have to understand is that it takes about 1 year to 15 months for the economy to truly feel the impact of rate hikes. And so I have selected here in red all the previous rate hikes that still haven't really made its way into the economy if we're looking at it from a dead 1 year perspective. Of course, if we're looking at it from a 15-month perspective, well, then you got to include November 2nd, 2022 and September 21st, 2022. However, if we're just looking at it just from 1 year, well, we still have a lot more pain that the economy truly hasn't felt. And so while the Federal Reserve needs to have this rhetoric to control inflation expectations, the reality is that the Feds hiked a little bit too much, and we're going to start feeling that as we get closer to 2024. And so right now, the idea on Tesla is, yes, I'm short-term bullish on Tesla, but I'm long-term bullish on Tesla, but I'm medium-term bearish on Tesla. And I know this may blow the minds of some individuals, but what I'm saying is that, yes, I do expect Tesla to continue rallying up into the end of November, but the challenges and the pain for Tesla are still not over, because one of the things we have to understand is that Tesla is a very interest rate sensitive stock, because of course when rates are high, when rates are extremely high for auto loans, well, who's gonna buy a new car, yeah, a Tesla, when you have to pay 9 to 13% depending on your credit score to finance a new car? And so that definitely stifles the growth for Tesla. However, yes, I'm still long-term bullish on Tesla, especially when you see these legacy automakers pretty much stop their plans to really push forward with making more EVs. And so this is actually good for Tesla and bad for those legacy automakers, because they're losing so much money on their EV vehicles that they have to please their shareholders and try to focus on their internal combustion engines to turn a profitable a quarter for the stock, which is good in the short term but bad on the long term for them, which is gonna help Tesla out in the long term. And so this is one of the reasons why I'm bullish for Tesla as we move forward into 2030. However, going into 2024, when there's more economic challenges that are going to slowly start making its way through the pipelines, well, that's when I'm a little bit bearish for Tesla, again, in the medium term. But I do have exposure to Tesla in my long-term portfolio, and I do trade Tesla in my short-term trading account. Recently, I talked about in previous videos a few weeks ago of Tesla getting rejected at the 247 level, and it absolutely did, and that's when I was bearish. But now I'm switching to a short-term bullish mindset for Tesla for my trading account, but of course for my long-term portfolio, it still remains the same. I'm still long-term bullish on Tesla, which I don't know why it's very difficult for multiple people to understand. What's my view on Tesla. I try to provide a holistic approach to the overall markets, and I talk about Tesla in the short term, and I also talk about Tesla stock in the long term. So if you're only a long-term investor, then fine, you don't really have much to worry about. You just know that going into 2024, there are going to be some challenges in the first 2 quarters. But if you're a long-term investor, it really doesn't matter anyways. Those are just great opportunities that you may find yourself wanting to buy the dip. But if you're short-term trading Tesla, then yeah, let's go ahead and take advantage of this ride up, but let's not just automatically throw it out the window that challenges are still there for Tesla. But with that said, guys, I just wanted to make a quick video for you guys, just making a quick update with Tesla stock. Let me know in the comments section down below what are your thoughts for Tesla stock as we move forward. And also, before you guys go, make sure to check out this next video right over here, and I'll see you guys on that next video. Take care, guys.